Hey, what's going on, guys? Phil here with podcast 206. Today's guest is Torry, aka YROTT, as you guys know him in Twitch chat. He is actually our lead engineer for Mechcommander Mercenaries. We've had him on before, and I felt like it was a good time to have him on again. One, to talk about MCM, but also to talk about Mechwarrior Online and Mechwarrior 5. So anyways, first off, dude, how you doing?
Oh, good. How's it going?
You know, a little bit. I got my camera now. You can see me, whereas last time it was like Predator vision. It was weird.
I'm not thrown off as much this time. Last time I was like, is Phil talking? Is this just a robot? What's going on?
It was weird, dude. Yeah, man. How have you been? How's life? I mean, obviously you're is it technically, can you say programmer nowadays? Do people get mad? Because that's what you are. You're a programmer, right? I mean,
yeah. My job title is like software engineer, but you know, I do a little bit of engineering stuff, but a lot of software. It just depends on what projects we have in the queue at work.
So how's that been? I mean, do you work from home, or are you usually in the office anyway, or?
I was usually in the office. I've been working from home since March, so it's been pretty routine. You know, most of my stuff is just me coding on a single project, so I don't have to, you know, really be too much. I just have to deal with, you know, my boss and a couple other engineers, but it's not like I have to have a whole team of people to try to coordinate online, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, have you noticed a shift in, like, you feel you're more productive being home, or
there's days? Yeah. You know, I've had a little bit of less free time because I'm taking my wife into work, since otherwise you have to take like a shuttle bus, and it's like, no, you don't need to be around a bunch of people all the time, like, or have to walk, you know, from their parking. So you know, a little bit less free time, but you know, I've been getting stuff done, so it's not been too bad. And I've worked from home before, so it's not really that crazy to me. I mean, just staring at a screen here, staring at a screen at the office, it's not that much different.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's go ahead and talk about the stuff. Obviously, I bounce a lot of things off of you because you do have previous experience in gaming, like in the.
I got a little.
Well, okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. What did you do in the, I guess, sort of like the gaming scene?
So I was a in-studio QA at a AAA studio for like a little over a year. Shipped a couple titles in that role, and you know, I mean, there's a lot of testers. There was like 100 of us at that place, plus other facilities. So, you know, it's a little bit different scope than some places. But you know, I did that, and I, you know, been a programmer since then. Not necessarily in the gaming industry, but just kind of building on those skills. And I'd always wanted to work in the gaming industry when I was younger, so I've been kind of following it. But you know, just a little bit of experience in the industry and around it.
So yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying is, me and you usually have a little bit more in depth, and I think I trust your opinion a little bit more when we talk about stuff, because I think you have an insider sort of perspective of, you've worked for a company as well, in that, and then also you worked in QA, so I think you know.
Yep. I've seen some stuff.
Yeah. And then because you are an engineer programmer. We're just gonna say programmer. I'm not gonna say engineer anymore. You're a programmer. You understand the complexities as well, of stuff like when we get into modding and game development. So with that news, let's talk about MWO, because me and you have talked in length. We had our own speculation, if I'm honest, because off screen we've talked literally for hours about, like, I honestly. My position on Mechwarrior Online and PGI was, I did not think it made sense, and I said this multiple times on stream. I said I don't think it makes sense for them to continue development on MWO. By the way, this is all way before the recent podcast.
This is like before Mech 5 even launched. I think we started talking about something else.
And then it was like, because it does make sense, because like they would have to redo like a lot, and of course now we have the podcast, and they're looking at dumping resources in. How did you feel after listening to that? Is there anything that, like, because like I said, I didn't feel like it made sense for them to, but now hearing Russ basically say why maybe financially it doesn't make sense to dump maybe 2 years into resources behind the scenes, or do you feel like they should be doing both, or are you just happy with, like, basically MWO? I mean, it's a lot to dissect there, obviously.
I've changed my opinion on what I thought they were going to do since Mechwarrior 5 launched. Before Mech 5, I was like, okay, they're going to come out with Unreal Engine, and then they're going to have a 2-year dev cycle, and we might see MWO 2. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe they'll do it. And then after Mech 5 came out, we got into modding and looking at how things work and how that connectivity is and what all they'd have to do to make it work in Unreal and with the Mech 5 stuff. I was, man, it's going to be a pretty tight, 2 years to even get MWO ported. And then once you get it ported, you need the revenue to support 2 years of development out of it. So how are you going to get that back if everyone's expecting to get all the mechs I own? Like I have, a couple hundred mechs. I don't want to just start over, right?
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of design problems there that have to address, which we kind of knew was going to happen anyway if they thought about doing it. But Russ points out, it's 2 years and we may not even get the same product out of it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be every feature of MWO one-to-one ported over in Unreal in 2 years. We could get like quick play and most of the mechs, not a problem.
That's also assuming like naming conventions. That's assuming it was just an upgraded MWO, call it 2.0. Sure. But like we've also said, like
I guess we should couch that with to do any sort of dedicated server multiplayer platform with the Mechwarrior 5 engine, whether it's MWO 2.0 or Mechwarrior 5 Online, whatever. It's still 2 years of development is going to get you that network infrastructure from the back end stuff, and get all the mechs ported that you need to kind of fill those. If you're going to port all the mechs, are you going to have a product that people are going to spend money on then, though?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to draw those people in with it to get them to spend money on stuff they already had in MWO?
Yeah.
Is it enough better that that's worth the expense?
So I mean,
so I commiserate with Russ there. That's a tough call.
Yeah. I mean, timeline wise, we've talked about that. So they have 5 years, and that started, I believe he said June or July. I was under the impression that the extension ended in December, but he corrected me on the podcast, which was I think he said June or July. So they're already in there.
I think they had given themselves a little bit of time on some of the like your contract agreements and stuff to kind of give them some buffer,
leeway.
So I'm sure. So
now that so we have a release date, and again I talked about that in a previous video, December 10th on Steam and GOG, as well as December 10th launch on Steam and GOG. They're also launching the DLC. You heard Russ talk about obviously planning another DLC. He mentioned April, and he said possibly 2 a month.
To a year.
A year, but then also saying like, I mean, he said it himself, which I think is a no-brainer, which is a clan DLC of some sort.
They're going to do it eventually. It's just, when does that fall into their timetable, and what are the things they need to get done before then?
Going back to the Mechwarrior Online aspect and possibly a 2.0, do you feel any particular way? I mean, being an engineer, I don't know how many they have at Piranha Games. I know it's not an incredible large number, so I don't know what the credits say at Mechwarrior 5, the end of that, but let's just say it's 10. I don't know if that's high or low.
That's in the ballpark, I think, yeah.
Right. So do you feel like they should do both, continue development on Mechwarrior Online and actually like focus there and get that at least revenue stream going, and also maybe just have a small team of, I mean, again, it would be a handful of guys like really doing the structure for, I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize, well, host state rewind and how important like network security is.
Yeah, there's a lot more to networking code than is in Mech 5 right now.
Because if you don't do host state rewind, if you don't do server-side authentication, you do have to deal with the just endless cheating and stuff for client side that you have to worry about, and just I mean, we see it in every other shooter that we have, right? So
yeah, I know Russ likes to point out every once in a while, but MWO actually does have some really good network code, and I know people are going to be like, oh, I don't know, but as far as multiplayer games go, it's pretty good. And with mech pacing, it's not Call of Duty, so you don't have all those like milliseconds that are super important, but it's pretty good for what it is, and it's a lot of data when you think about how many mechs and all the stuff going on.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, even light mechs being able to juke and jive and still being able to place a dual heavy Gauss or dual AC, something to be able to take its leg or torso out. But
so, I mean, that's a long way from co-op in Mech 5, I think.
Yeah. So how do you feel? Like, are the initial, were you surprised at what he said? Were you, it pretty much lined up with, it was sort of,
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily think he would, mention, like melee or something like that.
I don't. I don't see
And
them
I get
working.
it. Like, it would be amazing if they figured out a way to make that work, and be a big kind of feather in their cap that they're the first ones to do it in like a big multiplayer game. That'd be
a
kind of
Mechwarrior
cool.
game, not a
Yeah, a MechWarrior
yeah.
multiplayer. I mean, Melee and Call of Duty is not that impressive, but um, there's a few things like that I was surprised you mentioned, but his logic and reasoning behind it is exactly the same stuff we do at contracts, that we do in our office and other places where you really got to look, okay, how many hours is it going to take? What's our return on investment? What are we going to get out of this? Is it worth us doing this? So, that's a lot of that stuff that I think gamers miss out on is,
well, and they don't
do
like to hear.
You don't like to hear it because you're like, we'll just do it and we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I gotta pay for this 100 employees for 6 months.
In this case, you're a lot of fans are like, you literally are admitting, because we all knew you haven't done anything for the community for 2 years, and like you have to show some faith. And I think that's a valid, 100% valid, and he even recognized that. That's why I was trying to sort of stress, like, it's a 2-lane road. Like you're asking a lot of players that have, I would say most have probably spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So like, just to say, oh, well, we need more money from you. It's like, well, yeah, but you gotta
right.
It's a relationship here.
Kind of back to your point about splitting, having some people working on MWO, have some people work on maybe some Mechwarrior 5 backend that could support an MWO 2 or Mechwarrior 5 Online, and also working on your DLC. I mean, that's not impossible. It's just one of those things where you're gonna have a small bit of people from different departments working on different things. So once they get Mechwarrior 5's feature set figured out, know what they want to do for DLCs, they can figure out how many engineering hours they need, and then they can be like, okay, well, we really need you 4 programmers to do this, and then you guys could be working on some online improvements, and then hey, we need a guy over here to do MWO stuff for a bit. But it just depends on their staffing and how much scope they have for stuff.
Well, I think also too is how successful has Mechwarrior 5 been for them financially, and what is the Steam GOG launch going to do?
Yeah, and because honestly, I think the Steam launch is going to be big. I think it's going to do well for them. I hope anyway. But based on what you see online and people's comments, I think a lot of the negativity about PGI is people that already play MechWarrior. It's people that have been around and like are salty about something PGI did or some nerf or whatever reason they have to kind of not get behind and support it. A lot of people out there don't even know Mechwarrior 5 is on EGS. They're just they only play on Steam. They don't look at other platforms. Something with GOG. It's just people that live in their own little bubble, and then they see it on Steam's front page and go, "There's a Mechwarrior 5? Yeah. Oh yeah, I played 4 all the time."
Yeah.
So I think they're going to see a lot of that where there's people that just aren't as in the loop as most of us Mech fans, and people that aren't playing MWO are going to see this, go, "Whoa, what's this?"
Well, that's why me and you have talked of like how important we felt that getting the DLC out before it hit Steam, which obviously it launches. They didn't mention any type of. They mentioned a bundle. They didn't mention a price point for that bundle, but you got to assume the game, and then
it's probably $60, right?
Yeah, or something, because the
$40,
game
$50 for the game, and then so probably 70 or something.
Yeah, so that coming out, but I mean, my only concern with that is, the reality of it is the experience players had a year ago on launch hasn't changed at all as far as the story and you getting into the game of Mechwarrior 5. It hasn't changed at all, right? And so if you look at all of the reviews that have happened, I mean, one of the top ones out there, I mean, they're all negative. They're like, hey, if you just like basically stomp your robots shooting each other like Mechwarrior Online, you'll enjoy it. But everything else, and so that's where I feel
the narrative award it.
That's so funny.
And listen, we harp on their story, but the actual story in Mech 5 is not bad.
It's fine. It's just storytelling.
There's some clunkiness to it, and it's fine. I mean, they'll improve that as they go, and then we're adding career mode in it. So
do you even care about this? Yeah.
I mean, you might play the story once, but you're just going to play career mode after you play the story, right?
Yeah. I just, like a part of me still says like, I just wish it would have been just this, like epic experience that you want to play over and over and over again. Like, and
yeah, but I mean,
that's what's tough. That's what's tough. You know,
I think there are people that will probably be. I mean, imagine, if you go back and play one of the old Mechwarriors, there's a lot of nostalgia, but
it wasn't good.
Is it that much better?
No, it hasn't held up 100%.
Right. And so, we may be looking at it more as, these old people that
we're gonna get totally hosed for that, by the way, saying that, but it's true. Like, I will say,
no, and like they're fun games, and there's a lot of nostalgia there, and that's always hard to judge.
Yes.
But Mech 5 could be the game that some little kid plays now with their dad that used to play Mech 4. So I mean, there's some of that there that may not be as apparent now.
For me, at least, 2 was hugely nostalgic, and I have all these grand memories of it because I was a child playing it, and so rose-tinted glasses and like your first computer games and all of that. Like, of course, those are going to be epic memories. But like I was, as I got a little bit older, Mech 3, I just remember, I still think Mech 3 is hands down by far the best narrative game. I mean, where they had the voice actor do the mission briefings every single time, and they were doing some cool stuff. Like, it was really cool. Now, obviously, they didn't have the graphic fidelity that we do now, but
sure,
you could have imagined the Mechwarrior 3 campaign in what we have now, and you'd be like, holy shit, that'd be awesome. Like, and
for some reason, Mech 3 is just a black hole to me. I don't remember that game at all.
You don't remember? So basically, they're coming down.
Somehow I skipped that one.
Yeah, they're coming down from orbit, and the dropships get shot down, and like you're going up against the clans, and yeah, it's really good. Yeah,
I probably played it, but it was one of those games that I somehow didn't play as much as Mech 2, I guess.
I played a lot of it. So. I played online, multiplayer, and then Mech 4, of course. And Mech 4, I mean, a lot of people like the story. I wasn't as big of a fan, but I played the crap out of online. I mean, in leagues, on, of course, we had Microsoft Zone back then as well, too. So, I don't know, man. Like, that's what's interesting. I mean, as far as the whole... As far as MWO... we've talked a lot about monetization, and it's funny because I've had a lot of comments on the videos, regards to like, like, hey, you're not getting it, faction play is really important. And you know what, you may be right out there, and maybe I do need to have a conversation with someone. I don't know if you were really involved with faction play, or like what are the benefits,
I played it a good bit in Community Warfare Beta, and then I kind of tried it a little bit more recently than that, but when I play MWO, I'm usually just sitting down for a couple matches and then calling it a day. So it's hard to sit in queue for a while and then play a long match for me, depending on the day. But it's just something I haven't sunk as much time to, because I just play like a couple of quick play matches and be I'm good for now. So but they're fun sometimes.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I just feel like I'd love to hear people be imaginative with the responses, other than just like, if you don't support faction play, like, I'm out. It's like, well, like you're gonna have to really give a reason, and like that's what Darren and Matt are looking for, right? And even myself, like, that's what sucks is, like, I've always wanted to participate in faction play, but as soon as it was just Corridor Warrior Online, I had no interest. I had no interest of bashing my head against the keyboard.
I mean, even beta, it was a lot of just stack up at the gate. We're just going to firing line all day.
It's purposeful funnels. Like, it's this thing. And I just, like,
it's
to me,
to an extent, especially when you play against a good team that's going to have a strategy to try to get, through that corridor and fight you. But it is a little goofy at times.
Because, I mean, the reality of it is it hasn't been successful. If it was successful, everyone would still be playing it. And I feel like that's a very important thing to remember.
There's a lot more than that. There's a lot more than the gameplay that I think hurts it, though. I mean, you've got long queue times, so you're going to sit there forever.
No matchmaking. I mean, you
sure, no matchmaking. You could lump that in maybe. But then also, like, the rewards for playing a lot of faction play, like owning the planets, getting MC out of them and stuff like that, you only can really do if you're in a big unit.
Yeah.
And so people don't have, like, with a small group of friends, don't have a reason to go in and play.
And that was actually,
get some achievements, get some mech bays.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work to get that, and then you don't get the bigger rewards out of it.
And that was actually something I pointed out, which was something that was really cool with Eve, which was, let's just say you have a really cool, good group, but it's a small group. At any given time, let's just say you could have a 12-man. But in Eve, the cool thing is what you could do is you could do small unit tactics and go behind enemy lines and subversion, and you could be pinpoint. In faction play, you didn't have that ability. You didn't have the ability to, like, because you were a smaller unit, you weren't one of these big ones, you could, like, you know, attack a plant. You know, like, there was nothing for a small unit that is capable to do outside of just the normal invasion. And of course, once they introduced the regular maps with, like, you know, the drop list, they're, and that's where I feel like it was good finally hearing Russ basically say it was a mistake from the beginning. I mean, that's pretty much what he said as far as the design. It was a mistake from the beginning. And that, but I wonder what version he would like to see, and, like, what could you take what's there? Could you take all the bones and systems and make something that is actually fun,
sure,
active, and sustainable? Because, like, I so many people, I think, just do not. That's why every single suggestion, I'm like, well, what if you did events during the solo and group queue? And they're like, no, you need to keep them separate because there's no point for bigger groups. And I get that, but I'm looking at sustainability, because sustainability is where you're waiting for, I don't know, however long for a match, and there's just not really a whole lot of population, and then you're creating other buckets and stuff like that. I just feel like, is there a way to keep faction play separate, but reorganize it into something that is actually coherent and fun and sustainable?
Or, you know, can we turn it so quick play somehow influences it? Not necessarily as directly, you know, involved, but, you know, if you can earn faction rep in quick play somehow, even if it's not as good of a return on investment, and if your actions in quick play for that faction do some kind of bonus in faction play, so it's kind of connected, you're still getting a little piece of it, even just playing quick play, you know, will that draw people in if they know, oh, well, you know, I was doing this in quick play that helped out somewhere. What did that do for me? Oh, well, let's go look at the faction, you know.
Yeah. I also
maybe
feel
there's
like
more of that where you kind of try to bridge them
sure.
without making them, you know, together.
Yeah, I can, like I said, I may be completely wrong in saying, like, I don't think, like, I don't think there's enough pull right now with faction play to, I mean, in its current state, like, no one's, you know, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was populated all the time and people were loving it. I also feel like another problem that I remember bringing this up with Darren when it first went live was 24/7. That's a tough thing to pull. And that would be interesting. What if faction play was event based and it wasn't every single 24 hours, like where you're always in queue? It was like, hey,
yeah,
maybe a certain period during the days or certain weekends or something like that.
The problem there, I think, is that the people that really like faction play and that play it with 12-man groups, if faction play is not there every day they play, are they going to play on those days at all? So then are they only going to play once a month? And now they're not going to spend money on it because they're only playing once a month. Like there's something like that where you got to kind of figure that out.
I don't have an answer to that.
I know. Like I don't either.
A part of me is like, yeah, I mean, but that's also the problem of, like, you do have people that really enjoy that. And that's why I'm wondering is, like, maybe there's someone out there that says they can look at all the systems and say, okay, here's the reality. We do have a population issue. We do have you know, an issue with new players hopping in, getting just raffle stomped. They don't know what they're doing, or we don't like Event Warrior, you know, a Corridor Warrior Online and stuff like that. So really think outside the box and bring in stuff in to where it's fun and enjoyable. And maybe there's some game modes that haven't been introduced to MWO that could be strictly for faction play as well. You know, like the first thing that pops in my mind is, what if faction play was just sort of longer versions, which they sort of are, of normal, sort of like, did you ever play Living Legends as far as their conquest mode in Living Legends? They basically had like 2 bases. Sometimes the Living Legends, they had more than one base where you could spawn at. But you had like these central sub bases that you could cap and spawn at. And also there was like repair bays and stuff like that. I've always just, I just always sort of wonder if like that was, you know, this pull and tug throughout the match of of, you know, like, okay, well, they took Alpha, you know, we need to really focus on that. Oh crap, they just took, you know, Charlie over there. Now they've locked down, they can respawn there. Now they're putting the pressure. Now, oh crap, our, you know, our defense right in our base is getting hit. Okay, hey, oh, and then you do a cool move and you push out and you're able to defeat. I just feel like instead of this just linear,
I think you're onto something there. There's definitely game modes that would be, you know, team versus team. That's not just attack their base or defend your base.
Yeah.
Which I think is where faction play ends up quite often, other than the normal maps, right? So all the fancy maps they have for faction play are just defend the O-gens, right? Defend the gun. So yeah, I mean, you could see something where, especially if they're, you know, Russ mentioned bringing AI elements in.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking that a Mechwarrior MOBA would be fun, but don't quote me on that.
At least aspects of it. Like what you're basically saying is you're saying like the idea that
spawn tanks, spawn helicopters, and then try to push those waves into the enemy base and, you know, fight over very hard targets, but you have AI help.
Yeah.
You know, could be interesting. And I don't know if that's what faction players even would want to play.
Yeah.
But it seems like that would be something where you'd have a little bit of a kind of a cushion where you could let a team that is underpowered versus that big 12-man team have some AI to at least pad, so it's not just a massacre, right?
Yeah.
It's not just you dropping and then getting dropship camped. It's, you know, you have a base and there's some kind of boundaries that you can push.
Yeah, I think some of the other issues too is just like how the systems are set up in the, you know, capturing a planet or not capturing, and the tug and war and stuff that they've gone throughout the years. And that's why I say is I feel like that discussion is pretty lengthy, and I don't want to just chop it up and say, well, I think faction play should just go away, because I do get that there are people that really enjoy it, and I want to, like, if they did something like Living Legends at Conquest, but it's like you can respawn, and based on your performance you unlock, you know, availability mechs. Like how they basically did in Living Legends is when you started you were given like a base C-bill, so you couldn't get in the best mechs, right? So it'd be the idea of like,
it's like Counter-Strike but with mechs.
Yeah,
you know,
and if you perform well, you build up. So well, I can deploy in the you know, at the time like the Timmy was really good or whatever, so you could deploy in a Timmy later. And but if you just went out there and you got wrecked, then you didn't really earn any C-bills. So like that was so I just feel like I would be interested in that. And maybe it's not limited to just 4 max. Maybe it's literally just a respawn mode. And someone was like, on comment on YouTube, is like, respawn, this isn't COD. And I'm like, we literally had it in Mechwarrior 4. We've had respawning before. Like, why is that a big deal? Like, and I said, if it's fun, why does it matter?
Right. Well, like, and you know, I think if we had the players to do multiple buckets, a free-for-all with respawns, a team deathmatch with respawns, where you just bring the same mech, no questions, just recycle, doesn't matter. Those would all be fun and be popular. Yeah. But, you know, they're going to have to slowly move towards that, not just dumping it on quick play.
Yeah. Now, speaking of free-for-all, let's just chime in, I guess, quickly on Solaris. Is there any save in Solaris?
I think they could do 4v4 Solaris. And the reason I say that is, if you look at what people want for group play, right? You want to go show that you're a great group and play against other groups. Maybe you want to drop in a quick play and just, you know, club seals. But, you know, one of the appeals is, you know, I have this lance, we're good. And it's not just the 2v2 arena. It's not just one, you know, it's big enough that you can have a full game of 4v4 of good players. And you've already got an ELO system. You've already got your mechs ranked out. You don't necessarily have to bucket them out. You could, you know, compress it down and be like, I don't care if it's an Atlas versus a Flea. You're going to get rewarded for playing that Flea as well as you can. And if you win, awesome, dude. Here, have a big prize. You know, so there's stuff in Solaris they could totally save and kind of change up the design to make people want to play it without just being a game of which mech is the best in this tier.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think those two things are what I would look for is do a 4v4 mode to kind of, you could turn that almost into a comp queue at that point, right? So you have 4-man teams and now you're playing other 4-man teams in Solaris.
Yeah, but I think they want 8. They don't want 4.
Sure.
Right.
And you could do an 8v8 in that same system, just in a normal map instead of the arena maps.
So you'd say like leave the mechs in the tier, like their rank 1, whatever. I don't even remember.
Sure.
Like I haven't played it forever. That's how much. So
Yeah,
like
there's
leave
7.
them, right? Yeah. Leave them in the 1 through 7, but then and so you can take a lower class versus, but if you win, then you earn more rewards or something like
And
that.
even if you lose, if you're expected to lose, just like Elo, if you're lower on an Elo score and you lose, you're kind of already expected to lose, so your Elo may go up even. If you lost like a grand champion, but you did pretty good, that kind of a thing. So I think there's a little bit of that where you can have fun, maybe even some events that kind of encourage people to play the, I don't know.
So are you
What's the
saying
worst mech to
organized
say?
groups, of course, or are you saying like should solos be able to drop in this as well, or because
Well,
then
I think for normal Solaris, like if you're doing 1v1s, that's where you would look at that kind of just play silly exhibition stuff and make it where the rewards for losing when like I said, a flea versus an Atlas, if you give that a boost where you can get a lot of stuff even losing.
Gotcha.
But your elo may not go up, right? But you could be like, well, he's a famed flea pilot that survived getting shot by an AC-20.
Yeah.
Whatever. But then for group, and if you're going to do 4v4 or 8v8 or something like that in that same system, you wouldn't have to care as much about tier, right? Because you're going to be eloing the teams.
Yeah.
And you're going to give them maybe a tonnage limit like you do in quick play. But now you've got a 4v4 or an 8v8 that you can use for comp play.
Yeah.
That sounds like promise to me.
Gotcha.
And make that kind of continuous thing that's always up and available for those guys.
Gotcha. And then, of course, though, with that, like I said, I feel like some of this is just bucket proms, right? I mean, faction play, you're taking people out.
Basically,
right?
comp queue is just Solaris queue, right?
Yeah, but I mean, comp queue, I think what's nice about that is, well, I guess they would still take whatever mechs they want, and it is whatever the rank it would be. They don't really care or whatever, right? I was just sort of thinking of, it's just more buckets, and then you take it. That's why every single time is sustainability. Like, can you do something where, maybe Solaris is just an event thing and like a weekend, and
and that's fine too. And I think
I don't know,
if you look at like World of Tanks, and I always reference World of Tanks because it's one that I've played more recently. It's free to play. They have events that last, anywhere from like a weekend or a couple of weeks to, here's a 3-month long, or, here's 3 different 1-month long events that are all connected to the same thing, but they're different game modes, right? It's not your normal battles. It's, right now they got the one with the crazy Waffen Tiger, whatever, super tank, and it's asymmetrical. It's one guy versus like 8 or something, so they do weird events like that. I think that's where like Matt mentioned, doing an event queue would be interesting, but it is tough with the buckets. I mean, you got to try to figure out how to get those players that want to come and play. Gotcha. But if you don't do anything in any of those buckets, then how are you going to get new people to come in or stick around?
This is where I don't envy Matt and Darren in the sense of you're going to have to sift through all this information. At the end of the day, you are going to have to prioritize and like, and because let's just hypothetically say faction player Solaris wasn't their prime, like in the grand scheme of things, or that may mean someone who's out there that loves those features, it could go away. It could just not get any love, like I don't know why you'd remove it if people are playing it every once in a while and you just leave it, whatever.
You wouldn't remove a feature. You would always just,
hey, it's not getting love. Yeah, let it die. And just let it,
maybe not let it
go
die,
to sleep.
but you would look at the metrics and be like, okay, do we put time in and energy to make it better, or just leave it where it is?
That's a good point. I wonder what are the metrics for actual people playing faction play in a given month and Solaris versus like just regular queue. Then it's tiny.
Quick play has a lot of people in it, by comparison to most, I think.
Well, you said 10,000 also too, right? He said 10,000 a day.
Well, that's players per day. I don't know if that's players that went into matches. Like if I just open it up and go to Mech Lab, am I a player or? And also, how many matches do you play that day? Because Charles' list does. I think you have to play 10 in a day to even register. Yeah, I think it's something like that, isn't it?
10 in a day or 10 in the month?
Oh, I'm sorry, maybe 10 in a month. But I forget.
Yeah.
And so it may not, be 100%. How that works out, but I don't know. So.
What would you do?
The other question, sorry.
Okay, go ahead. No.
Before I get too far, the other thing I was going to say is how many people actually, you don't have a metric for, but how many people that play quick play want to play faction?
Me.
Because I like faction. I enjoyed the games that I played. It was just hard to get into and took too much of my time to get a match and play a full match. And the rewards, it's like, I'll just play quick play. I'll get through this mech faster.
But then
or I'll get, better.
It goes back to buckets, and like if you're pulling a significant amount of people out of solo, then you're talking about match quality, and then like, again, all of it comes down to if you just had more. Yeah, if you had more people, then it wouldn't be as much.
Sure.
Like I asked, there's some Reddit threads and the YouTube comments, and I've asked, would you come back if things happen? Even one of the old, world champions players, Heimdallite, just said, hey, I would come back if they'd made changes, and actually did something. I would probably come back. So it goes to without saying, like, there are people that I think want stuff like rescale, want stuff like the skill tree change. By the way, skill tree, I went over this yesterday. Like it was so, like Russ did capitulate. He basically said, yes, it's not off the table, but his mentality was, well, you're used to it. And mine's like, well, 2 wrongs don't make a right. 2, if it drove people away, those are the type of things, to me, at least as a player, I look at. If it literally impacted your player base and you have people, and I've already screenshotted multiple just today of saying skill tree drove me away, and I'll come back if that gets fixed. And I have friends that drove away. That should just be a yes. We need to do something about it. Like,
yeah, and I don't think they have to change it that much.
No, go back. No, you know what I do?
I don't think they should go back though. I disagree.
No, I do. I do, but not how it was.
No, I know. Not the 3 mech system.
Because I don't know if you were there yesterday. I talked about this. Not the 3 mechs where you have to have 3 chassis. Because all they have to do is tag a C bill and an XP version to unlock each one. But where you had, I'm just saying, keep it simple. Go back to what they had, where you had the 8 basic, column, whatever you want. 4 elite, and then master module slot. And it wouldn't be a module anymore. You just give it a skill. These can be tied into quirks too. What I'm saying is the problem with the previous system, and I agreed with Chris on this, is all the mechs had the same benefits.
It was just a problem in the current system,
right? and there's no real choice to it. But where I was saying is use the quirks instead of it, being Excel, DXL. That should just be part of the base chassis. And then maybe there is a unique aspect of like a flea or whatever that gets a boost. And what I'm saying though is it's not based on just assault, medium, the class of the mech, and that's all it was before. So the problem is if you give 10% cooldown to a Timby, and I'm using that reference because that's when it was back then, you only got 10% on Hunchback as well. So like you didn't need to give the Timmy any more firepower. And that's where he had this weird pull and tug. And for me, I would say get rid of that all and have those where it's based on the actual chassis. So like the Hunchback maybe has a unique a quirk, and then the actual specialization for the variant as well, and have those tied in. And then that way it's unique. Every mech is unique. Yes, I understand it's a lot of fucking work, but it's easy to understand. New players come in, they don't have to fumble around, because if I eventually unlock 4, or maybe you have a little bit of branching there to choose, like you said, World of Tanks, where you got like I can choose between the 105 or the 90 mil, or something like that.
Or I could get the derp gun, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could get I don't know, something like the where you can go an LB specialty or just a flat out. Which one would benefit you, more, or something like that. My point being is, the current skill tree is I know which is tough because there's people out there that I think enjoy the incremental stuff. I just feel like
it's fun to level it up too, right? I stopped playing Max when I get to 91. Like I get to 91 skills, I'm like, I'll go level something else up.
I don't think it's fun though. I don't think it's
no, and
but that's
game theory there, but yeah.
But you said it's fun to just level. So what if though you could get more than like the module slot? I got a mosquito right here. The module slot or something like that, mastery slot. Maybe you could get 3 mastery slots. It's sort of like prestige, right? What if you did, once you got all of them unlocked, you could unlock 2 or 3, but obviously and that sort of ties into their XP sort of dump and C-bill expense, right? Like maybe those cost a lot more, but you're getting maybe 2 or 3 extra quirks or whatever specialty mastery stuff that you wouldn't be getting for. I just feel like regardless, that's like my idea, and it may be completely inconceivable, maybe completely wrong. I just feel like the current skill tree drove people away. It's still confrontation, like people still don't like it, and
yeah,
like just
it's
because
intimidating. I know I had taken a long break from MWO and came back, and the skill tree had been implemented, during my break. I came back, I'm like, what is all this? This is crazy.
Yeah. And then imagine you have 300 mechs and you have to redo every single one. Like,
yeah,
like that's just.
I didn't quite have 300 at the time, but
yeah,
but I got a few now.
That's when this came out, and it's just like, again, I feel like. Keep it simple, stupid, and I feel like
my solution would be,
all right, let's hear it.
Kind of what you were talking about.
Okay.
Except instead of just throwing away what they have and going back to that kind of system, you would just take all of your bonuses in a skill tree and kind of get rid of some nodes, but roll those bonuses into nodes above it. So you'd have a much smaller tree to work with. So instead of 91 points, you get down to like, say, 30 or something. And then if you want to make them unique to a chassis, you prune off parts and different branches so that you don't have, like, if you want a mech to just be a firepower specialist that is known for just putting out damage, you give it more of the firepower tree. Yeah. If it's known for jump jets, you give it the jump jet tree. And I know you hate the jump jet tree, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, just because jump jets need rework too. But yeah, no. Yeah. And yeah, you could do that. But, like,
it's the same thing that you're proposing. It's just using their existing system.
Yeah. So
programmer logic in me is
no. I mean, it depends. Yeah, maybe, but it's that still the idea that, like, if you were to, I don't know, let's just say a top tier mech right now, IV4 or whatever, that would basically say, like, one, it may have some firepower stuff, but then it doesn't have the survivability. Or it has the survivability and it doesn't have the firepower stuff. That's basically sort of what you're saying, is it would have individual nodes. Your skill tree would be specific for that mech and for that chassis and variant.
Right. So and maybe even just get rid of quirks at that point, right? Because if you have, say, you want the IV4 to be a tanky, quick draw, you just give it more of the survival tree and prune out the firepower tree. Yeah. And you quirk mechs that way. But again, that's going to be another complex thing that players are going to have to know and look for. And it's probably too messy.
That's still better. Well, no, I don't think it's messy, because quirks are messy how they're displayed to the player. I mean, really, like, if you don't know what you're doing, you got to click more info, then you got to scroll down. You don't know what is a quirk separate from what you just added from the skill tree too. That's always the color coordination there. And I feel like I
wish they had parentheses for, like, you get this
or just
from the skill tree
highlighted or a different color. Yeah. But even if you're taking what you're saying, that's still better than what we have right now, because basically you're achieving what we're saying. It means it's a lot of work. But here's the thing is, rely on your community. And this is one thing that I wish I would have been able to do back in the day with quirks. I was able to do it behind the scenes. I was able to have some top level players at the time give me feedback, but it couldn't be an open relationship because, God forbid,
it's always tough. And,
because you don't want influence. Yes.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, part of the whole industry is kind of secretive on what you're working on. It's just a continuous thing. So you don't necessarily want to make every little thing you do public.
Sure.
And but especially, like, I don't know, was that with IGP around too?
No.
Or was that in PGI? Okay.
No, it was PGI. But I mean, it's not like you're working on the Manhattan Project. You know what I'm saying?
No, I know. But it's just, like, kind of the way the industry is.
Like, I'm saying right now, like, you're coming to the community, you're asking, how can we turn the ship around?
And
stop
it's late enough now in MWO's life cycle that it makes sense to be a little bit more public about stuff.
Now, if you're going to be like, talking about Mech 5, the next DLC, you don't have to talk about it when you're ready. Like, I get that. But if you're talking about, like, hey, this is what we're going to do to faction play to turn things around, and
it's a live service, and it's like I said, it's been a long time in this development cycle. It makes sense to do a little bit more, public goodwill, especially, like Bombadil talked about. It's not a bad thing.
No, but I mean, out of the things, you know, I've seen for gameplay, because I think that's super important, and just you being in the mech lab and gameplay, rescale is obviously, a lot of people are positive about that. Skill tree, I think, affects current players and new players. And then of course maps and map design, and then that sort of factors in with, you know, game modes to some extent. But I don't know, man. Like I feel like there could be a lot of life for MWO. It's just how much will they listen, and how much can they listen, and how much can they do, right? And you know, like the timeline, it's what are they going to do, and how long is it going to take, and you know, do you have community buy-in? Because if they listen to the community, and I'm not saying you design like you know, like you'll hear like just listening to top players, they know what they're talking about. You're right, they may know they may know the intricacies of the systems and be really, really good. Doesn't mean they're game designers or like know how to design as well. It's like, you know, like I'm not gonna.
There's also a thing that you learn in QA, which is QA testers are really good at the game, right? You spend 80 hours a week playing a game for work, you're going to be good at it, potentially. So when we did play tests with people, though, what happened is you see that things that are balanced for like normal play are completely unbalanced in the hands of a good player.
Yeah.
So you take something that takes a high level of skill and does a ton of damage, but it, you know, it requires a lot of precision. Top end players get that and they just murder anything. Yeah. But you give it to some new guy and they can't even use it. Like, it's a useless gun to them.
But I mean, if we talk about that breakdown in history, the only time that was really applicable was Peep Goss or Peep Meta, right? I mean, that's our...
Sure.
Right. I mean, like skill based, and it's funny because like I didn't see it back then. Like I didn't, that like, until you go play other shooters and you realize, you know, like landing a sniper shot or the ability, like you watch Shroud and he can go and he can take out an entire squad. Like you can't necessarily do that. It happens. My point being is like if you're walking around in your mech and you see 4 mechs come at you, more than likely you're gonna die, right? And it's like you even see it with like ATMs now. They're super easy to use. Lasers are super easy to use. Point, and you just, you know, like now the ability to be pinpoint though and hold like your beam, that's where skills come on. But it is interesting to where, because of the scale issues as one, and then the mobility nerfs, and then certain weapon nerfs, I feel like all three of those, it was like a trifecta that just, it slowed the game down, which basically made
that was
those styles die. Yeah, but I don't think it was the right call.
If you go back and look, I mean, a lot of what they were doing back then with balance was trying to extend time to kill. Yeah. Because one of the complaints people had was you turn the corner and there's a dire wolf, you're dead before you even realize what it had. Like your paper doll doesn't even pop up for the dire wolf, and you just die to quad, you know, ultra 10s.
Yeah.
So there's some of that where they intentionally wanted to extend time to kill.
Yeah. But now that dire wolf is laughed at. I mean, that's my point. It's like, and that's the problem. Right.
Part of what they're doing though is you nerf everything enough that everything's kind of
bland and boring, and yeah.
In order to make time to kill longer, you have to nerf everything, right? You can't just buff everything to make time to kill go down.
Me and you, and I've said this now, it's sort of, you know, like maybe, just maybe, that was the wrong thing to do. Maybe you should have had, because back in Peep Goss and stuff like that, there was just no counter. SRMs weren't good at the time. There was no like LRMs, or was it like rock, paper, scissors, you know, like lasers at the time. You had this just void of balance and ability to counter that, and it came in, instead of making jump jets unique and like the amount of jump jets, maybe a charge or whatever, they just nerfed jump jets. So then jump jets suck across the board, but then they mechs are too big, and so now they're easy to pinpoint. Bigger mechs, you know, like, and then then you smack it with mobility.
Like the side torso with ATMs a little bit,
yeah,
which is terrifying. I mean,
and of course, I guess what I'm saying is like, even if you reverted or like changed look at it, there are some really good players out there, and that's, I feel like obviously the carnage would happen a little bit more, but you'd be able to pull off stuff as a good player, and that's been interesting playing other games, and then coming back to MWO. Also, you realize how slow mechs are, like really slow. Like even faster mechs are really slow compared to like other shooters and movements and stuff. But
They're not as slow as Mech 5.
This is
but
definitely true. How do you feel about rescale, like in MWO?
So I think rescale would be good to try to like bring that, it's kind of on this line. If they kind of just made it go a little bit more, smaller overall on the top end, so that scale happens. But I also think as part of that, if you're going to do a rescale, you should do like an art pass more or less, where you go through and look at, okay, what mechs really just have a ton of quirks on a side torso? Can we do something with art? Get rid of that quirk, but make the art better.
Yes.
Or okay, the hitboxes on this are just awful. We always get, from any angle, you can get the, center torso.
Yeah.
Can we tweak this a little bit, make this geometry a little bit better? And, that way you don't just rescale everything and then have a new problem with a mech that now is, out of place in the new scale. Yeah. You can go through and isolate those individual
proportions.
Yeah. Like, I mean, if I'm trying to think of a good example.
Fafnir is a good one. The big, just like you could
just tighten up just a smidge. Right?
And same thing with the leg or any of that, because one, if you shrunk it down, it would dramatically help. Same thing with Atlas, but I feel like
but it's just overall, it's a barn door wide.
It's a barn door, right? Yeah. I mean, they did some nip and tuck on the awesome, but it's still you could.
Well, that was gonna be my next one. Was like the awesome in beta was just
huge.
And it was all door, and they added like shape to it, and it looks way better. But doing some kind of pass like that, I think could do a lot of good. And I would do it as part of a rescale. If you rescale and it looks fine now, sure, you don't touch it. But if you rescale and it still looks way out of place, and you feel like you need to quirk it still, maybe do a tweak.
Yeah. I wonder again, because if they do that, then you're having to update your UVs potentially, right?
And it depends on what they do. I mean, you can actually rescale individual parts of a mech. So instead of doing the whole mech, volumetric to, fit the proportions, you could go in and rescale geometry and your art.
Yeah.
Well,
I think they use a script. I think they use a script, or they used a script.
Sure, but I'm saying you do the script to get the base scale, and then you go through and tweak the base geometry a little bit.
It would be huge. Like when I talk about this on stream, and if you're listening right now, hop in Mechwarrior Online, look at the flea or locust, and then look at the cougar. The problem is or the wolfhound. The problem is volumetric. I think is the wrong way to look at it. Like that shouldn't have the.
Well,
what is our fascination with just because something is heavier, it has to be bigger?
Well, and so that's where it's nice to use it as a baseline.
Sure.
Where you get kind of a rough gamut, and I think their baseline needs to be tilted a little bit.
It's like 90
definitely
degrees.
Smaller on the top. Yeah. But once you get that baseline, then you can go and look. Okay, make those comparisons and individually tweak from that baseline, or give it some kind of offset, so it's not as bad as jumping from a 20-ton to a 35-ton, and all of a sudden it's just huge. It's giant target.
And then you go up to assault, and you just I just can't stress. I think the gameplay implications there are massive, and then you top that with mobility rework across the board. Because here's the thing, I'm all for engine desync. I think it was fine, because I think a lot of people and hear me out, the issue was you had certain mechs that had engine limitations, so they physically couldn't go any faster even with the multipliers given by the engine. So don't forget that. So looking at you, BJ, 235, you couldn't, it is what it is. Or the Cataphract 4X, or there's certain mechs that just have low engine caps. The problem is the mobility that I'd given via quirks before that. I don't have the numbers right for me, but I don't think they were all the way given to the mechs afterwards. I think Chris took whatever he was doing as far as his.
The engine cap is so low that maybe the base stats are based on a smaller engine or something.
I don't. Well, I think at the Locust at one point in time it was 140% increase on Excel, because it needed it in gameplay, right? But I think
especially before the rescale, right?
Yeah, but I don't know what the number was in the tool, in the XML file for that. I don't know what percentage or 0.0, I don't know what that was to represent the increase. Anyways, I'm fine with how currently engine desync is. I think it's fine. The problem, and I agree 100%, is that mobility across the board got hit, and retrospectively, I don't think it was the right way to go, because you basically put a nail in the coffin of anything with any type of disproportionate size, which is pretty much the Cougar and above.
Anything 35 tons is definitely way too big.
You're right. Yeah. And so, you know, and I think the argument well, you know, if you shrink down those mechs, that, you know, those, the Jenner 2C, well, no, I'm saying shrink the Jenner 2C as well down. My point being though, is like I think you'll have to redo quirks across the board. And I would say maybe just arguably, it would be a full pass. You'd do a rescale, mobility, and a requirkage, because if you shrink it down and you keep the Wolfhound with that armor buffs and all that, or if you shrink everything down with the IV4 and you leave the size it is with the quirks it has, mother of God. Like, you know, like, so I feel like maybe if it tied into the skill tree, and see how all these, like, it's a spider web of things. Like, if you could do that, you know.
It's when you're talking gameplay and you're talking about, you know, the reason it was quirked is because it was scaled so weird, or the art was, you know, a little bit too large on this side, or you know, there's all these things that kind of come together, and then you've got to try to figure out how to.
Well, IV4 specifically, I quirked it because I knew no one takes LRM. Yeah, SRM 6s with art. No one ever does that. It was actually pretty deadly with LB 10s and dual AC 10s, but then MRMs come around and it's not brought down into line, and so you've got this super OP mech that has been running rampant, and has been OP. It's been OP, and there's other examples of that. But it's, you know, new tech comes out and it's not adjusted for that new tech, and it's just, you know.
So. Yeah, well, and I think that just doing a design pass on all of those things and going through and figuring out what are the outliers, which ones are really just overquirked or really lost out, and just, even if you don't do a full rescale, if you just go through and address those worst outliers, that's a lot of goodwill, I think, in the community, and a lot of positive impact on game balance. But the game's not that out of balance right now. I think people forget, you know, it's not a horrible place. It's just there's outliers, right? There are things that are just a little out of the line, but they're not. It's not like you're just going to take, you know, what was it, an LRM Atlas every game because LRMs are completely broken in a Lermageddon.
Yeah,
you know, there's no crazy thing like that going on. But just a little nip and tuck on some of those things, I think they can iron out a lot. But it's just a design pass. You know, you throw some design effort at it, find it out, and then figure out what work you need to do on it.
Sure. So let's go and talk about our project. Let's talk about how's development coming along. What are we doing? Are we doing anything right now?
No. So I've slowed down a little bit on it for a couple of reasons. You know, for one, you know, we were kind of waiting to hear what the DLC was going to bring, and when that was going to come, because we had no idea on a release date. And so we didn't want to implement anything too crazy. And then, you know, the next week the DLC gets announced and comes out, and you're like, well, gotta fix this now. You know, so we didn't want to be in that boat. And then we also wanted to see what the feature set was as best we could to kind of gauge what work we're going to do on it. Because a lot of the stuff in the DLC is stuff that we've already had some kind of tangential bit of design that we want to put in Mechcommander. So, you know, they're introducing with the quirk system with the do the quest to get the blueprint to do quirks. But we had talked about doing quirks of some sort on mechs that are a little bit, you know, different than that, but, you know, kind of using some of the same systems possibly. So, you know, some of that stuff that we just wanted to see, where are we going to end up at? So
we don't want to double up. We don't want to, you know, them work on it, because they are a bigger, you know, they're going to be able to knock it out. So
I would rather PGI do my work for me before I have to go and do a bunch of it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And just, you know, I get busy at work every once in a while, and so it's kind of nice to occasionally just go, I'm not going to touch the mod today.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go play a game.
Well, I think, and because there have been people like, hey, what's going on? We haven't seen anything. And it's like, I think it's fair. You know, I want to do this podcast, talk to you, of course, what we were just talking about, but like Mechcommander Mercenaries. And for those that don't know, you can download this on Nexus and also the Epic Game Store. And I'm sure once it goes live on Steam, we'll have that set up too. So
assuming we can dump it on Steam Workshop, we'll put it up there too.
So how's now that you've had plenty of time on target, like how has it been in the modding scene, like altogether?
I think the community as a whole is learning. There's still a lot for us to kind of piece together the best practices. I know people are talking about trying to get a wiki together and get kind of all of our heads to just dump info, which will be good, especially if we can get some of that done by Steam launch, because there'll probably be more interest in modding once it's out on Steam and people can do Steam Workshop.
Yeah.
Maybe get some more modders coming in too. So, if the community can get that together, I think that'll help in the long run. But we've figured out a lot of stuff. It's just not all of it's easy.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I feel like I can definitely tap into you for this, because like, why? Because we have this in chat. We had a discussion recently. Someone popped in Twitch chat and they're like, they made a comment like, basically like, oh well, you can't do this for Mech 5, and you were like, no, you can. Well, it was like, why isn't there new? Yeah, why isn't there new campaigns or whatever, or why isn't there new missions or whatever? And like, it's like, because no one's done them. It's nothing's holding people back.
Yeah,
it's because, one, there's no documentation. I'm glad someone started a wiki. I was thinking about doing it myself. Me and you talked about that, but like, I just didn't have the time to like organize that and keep that rolling.
I haven't either. So it's just when I was like, I'll brain dump on it once we get something.
But there's no documentation. I sat down with Alex Garden months ago. It'd be great to talk to him again, because and that's where I feel like, okay, roger that, guys. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. We need to do it ourselves. And if it's through a wiki and a series of like YouTube tutorials and stuff, I think that's great. It's just, are modders able to do that? Because like, even of just like adding a weapon, or like someone's added a mech, like, why isn't that documented so other people are like pumping it out?
I think that modder that started those just hasn't sat down to write down the process. I think they're planning on it, because they're going to try to do, I think he's part of that Project Winter War mod. That's
stop being selfish. Post. Let people know.
So I think they just haven't gotten around to doing it.
Yeah.
I haven't written any of my stuff down for the community either.
Yeah, but you're totally like that's the thing.
I
is
respond
like
to people all the time.
Yeah, Discord, like you're.
Yeah, I try to be active, because I am one of the people that is actually a programmer during the day. Yes. So when it comes to doing stuff in Blueprint, it's not quite programming, but
visual
all the same
scripting.
Concepts.
Yeah.
It's all C++ in the background. It's just visual and does some weird stuff.
And I feel like you do have an up on a lot of people when it comes to that, because like, and I've told you, like, even if I hopped in to learn visual scripting, I don't have that background knowledge to visualize.
And even with my knowledge and coming from being a programmer, there's still stuff where I was, the first couple months I was like, wait, how do I do this very basic thing I do in C++ all the time? And I have to kind of refigure out, oh, well, I just got to look at it a little different, and now this makes sense. But it's just a little different to pick up.
So obviously we can talk a little bit about our and by the way, to clarify, we'll do the typical, all these things we talk about in Mechcommander are possible, going to change. These are just ideas. Some of them obviously, because we haven't implemented them, but we mentioned quirks, we mentioned metagame systems in the past, like the missions themselves, from the different type of missions to the economy, equipment, salvage, all those are things that we're going to dive into and changing in Mechcommander. We have been waiting on this DLC because it does impact some of those things where they're already developing, and then like the quirks. Let's talk about the quirks a little bit, because it's coming out for the DLC. Our plans, one of the things I always felt like is there's a problem in Mechwarrior 5 and Battletech by HPS, and even the other mods, of mechs really aren't like, they're a dime a dozen. You get them, it's like Pokemon, got to collect them all. There's nothing really unique or tangible. You just get it, it's the shell, and and I just felt like, how, and I was challenging, like, let's think about this, and we sort of came to the same conclusion differently, and you'd already documented the quirk system that we're doing, basically. That's sort of like, and the reason we laugh about that is because I just hadn't read the updated part that he had updated on our design doc yet. And
I was like, are you reading the design doc now, Phil?
Yeah.
I just wrote this.
Because like, it's so tough, because it's like, what makes, if you're living in the Battletech universe, do you like, are there qualities out there, like, you got different manufacturers, or what makes your Marauder special compared to another Marauder? And we sort of dove into that. So can you talk a little bit about what we're gonna possibly, and I say possibly, we should be able to do it. We are gonna do it.
Assuming that their quirk system in the DLC is as moddable as I hope it is. So PGI, please, too good.
Please.
So kind of what we want to do is have quirks be a few different things, right? So there's the permanent chassis quirk, which is basically going to be this mech is really good at this thing, or it's known for this specific, being good at or bad at or whatever. That's just permanently tied to that chassis, regardless of what you do to the mech. But then there'll also be some semi-permanent ones. So things like, let's say you did repairs in the field with a repair truck. Maybe we get a negative quirk even that said, hey, this is patchwork armor. It's going to cost you money to fix the hodgepodge of armor we just welded to your chassis in that mission. So next time you're at an industrial hub, if you want to get rid of this, penalty to repairs, you need to spend some time and money to remove this quirk. That kind of a thing. And then, the normal quirks where you want to just upgrade your mech or whatever, or maybe you did take it to a factory and like, hey, could you refit this and maybe put endo steel on it? Maybe that's a quirk now instead of a piece of equipment. It's something where you've had to go to a factory, you've had to go, hey, I need to do this improvement to my mech, please. Yeah. And then it sticks with your mech until something gets damaged or blown off or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So
you're saying like
the idea that you can add or remove quirks depending on what situations happen in the metagame.
And sort of like the idea of like the conditions of the mechs too, like that are out there that you have these, you may find early on, you may find a Marauder and be like, oh, this is awesome. And then you notice like, oh, this Marauder's beat to shit.
Quirks.
Yeah. What? It's like, its turn rate slower. It's got some glitch with the PPCs. So it's, yeah. So that's
kind of this idea that, even in real world scenarios, like I'm sure with your tank in Afghanistan or Iraq, after a few months of just being out in, normal use, wear and tear, stuff starts to get a little weird. Like, oh, well, on this one, you've got to knock 3 times and then pop the clutch and then turn the key.
That's so true.
Those actually. Kind of like stupid things you have to deal with an individual piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Maybe you get, oh, well, your engine got critted, so now your turn rate's going to suck until you can get it fixed because I had to bolt on some crap.
Yeah.
This happened, this happened, this happened. So now you've got this kind of character. And then, oh, well, I need to go to an industrial hub because this thing has 8 negative quirks. I need to go get some of this fixed.
Because like how we were looking at it too, you want to make it so that it feels like there's a reason. Because like right now, you just hit repair and there's...
Yeah, and sure, you get a penalty when you're in a war zone.
You don't care. You make enough, like...
Well, until you're in like the level, was it 15 or whatever, the top end where it's like triple cost. It's like, oh, okay, that kind of hurts. But... Yeah. What we were talking about is instead of being a cost where you're in the field, it's more that you're going to have to weld some stuff together that normally is bolted on, or you're going to have to use the wrong size bolt and hope it holds, all this stuff because you're in the middle of a war zone. You're going to improvise a lot of things. So, maybe if you're doing repairs there, you've got negative quirks too, but that's just delaying that cost until next time you go to an industrial hub.
But that being also said,
kind of manage that and make it more interesting.
Tying in reputation where, okay, let's just say you had a campaign of missions that were really tough, but you have good rep with Davian. So when you go back to an industry hub, there's not this super crazy, or maybe it's at cost. I mean, that's where it's like the economy aspect, the meta games of to where we're sort of looking. Anyway, so that's intriguing to us because like I just felt like how the mechs in BattleTech and Mechwarrior, they just didn't really have any. It just didn't feel like you were in BattleTech, like where.
Yeah, if you get a Marauder, it's a Marauder.
Yeah, because like when you're talking about it, like in the novels, if you're using that Marauder, and it's got holes punched through it, when they're talking about patchwork armor, they're literally just, using steel. Like but. That entire piece that, because the mechs are built modular would have to eventually be replaced. So the only place you could do that is at, a repair facility that has all those, things. And, again, it gives purpose to like maybe doing multiple missions in a row, but like, is that worth it? And, we don't want it just to be like this, just about money. It shouldn't just be about money too, because like, what if you find a really good Marauder that has really good quirks? Like it's like holy crap, this is like better than anything I've seen before. you're going to want to upkeep that, and that's a rare mech, right? And that sort of ties into their rarity thing as well. So we're looking forward to that. We talked a little bit about the salvage system, I'm not particularly fond of the salvage system. I'm not fond of it in BattleTech either. What are your thoughts on that? And
So
what would you do to change?
I like the idea of negotiation points, first off. And I know HBS Tech has a little bit of a similar system, kind of, where you have sliders. But the idea that, your reputation with the people you're dealing with is, gives you options in a contract negotiation is good. What I think would be better is if there were more options in that bar, right? So instead of always just dumping all of your points into salvage, you had salvage you can choose, random percent salvage, where, okay, I don't care what you give me, just I want some percentage of what I kill.
Yeah.
Maybe you can dump points into that too. So the idea is adding a little bit more possible options in that list, so that you have more reason to spend negotiation points.
Sure.
And make a little bit different choice than just salvage, always salvage.
Yeah.
And then on the back end, when you do finish a mission, like I said, if you can choose some salvage and then, you just get a random assortment of whatever's left, percentage wise, that would work great. I think that solves a lot of problems that Mech 5 has. But the other thing is, with the negative quirks we just talked about, if you salvage a mech but it has 8 negative quirks, it's not, you don't have to have 20 freaking salvage points to pick up that assault mech. You can get, a much cheaper assault mech, but you're still going to have to pay out the, wazoo in the end to get rid of all those quirks.
Or you don't get rid of the quirks and you just use it as
I find an awesome
economical.
AQ. It's slow and it doesn't turn very well, but it's got 3 PBCs and that's all I need.
Like it was free.
But it's a long-term investment, right? So if you were a merc out on the periphery and you found an awesome and it was in really bad shape,
you'd still use it.
You would definitely cart that thing on and carry it around and get it up and running. But you'd have your mech techs on it all the time trying to get it to, do that a little bit more. Yeah. So I think that's a system where you can, open up salvage a little bit on mechs and let people play around with it more, because there are a lot of mech chassis in Mech 5. DLC is adding 7 new chassis. So it'd be nice to be able to play more of them, right? Especially in Mechcommander, where you can drop 12 of them. Maybe more. Yeah.
So we also talked about with maybe unique items, like where it's a one use, sort of with quirks too, where
so kind of what I was talking about with like Indo Steel, where you need to go somewhere and get a quirk applied to give you more free tonnage, kind of thing. So like double heatsink kits. I think instead of having double heat sinks and single heat sinks being salvageable, you just get this double heat sink kits that you can swap on as a quirk.
So I think this leads into another discussion, which is
it
sounds a lot like a different mech lab.
Yeah, it does sound like a different mech lab.
Surprising you bring that up, Phil. Like that's
imagine that. It's like we've talked about this too much. No, so we had talked a lot about trying to, kind of hem-hawing about maybe doing a mech lab, but with, Reloaded and Merc Tech, they both have pretty good mech labs. I mean, Merc Tech kind of swings towards tabletop, and then Reloaded goes more towards MWO. But, those are still just, here's your, 12 slots in each component and, do the thing, right? Add an engine, whatever. So what you and I had talked about is trying to actually diverge more from tabletop and MWO and go more towards, what if we were looking at just Mech 4 and trying to make that the best system possible, right? Like what would the modern design equivalent of Mech 4 be?
And this actually spawned from discussion of Mechwarrior Online's Mech Lab, because Mechwarrior Online Mech Lab, they did something unique where they took the hardpoint idea, but then they used cannon loadouts, and then of course we had hardpoint bloat depending. But they took a step back in some regards, because I felt like it went back to just the min-max nature of crit slots, and then like it does sort of it sort of not shoehorns, or it sort of places like Indo and Pharaoh in these weird balancing mechanisms, but in BattleTech they would just be straight upgrades. It would just be cost and availability. And whereas if you look at Mech 4, what they did is it was a checkbox. Like if you wanted to include more heat sinks, you just include it. Like if you wanted to include, I got a mosquito in here, ammo didn't take up crits, but you could still have ammo explosions, of course. But it's like, why not just, like on the weapon itself, just tick, more ammo, and it takes up a tonnage.
This weapon, yeah.
Yeah, and it got, the discussion was, what did Mechwarrior Online do right, and what did previous titles do right or wrong? And like Mech 2, Mech 3 is just basically based off of the tabletop build rules, so it leaves a lot of problems. Very
especially
variations. Yeah. And then, but Mech 4 it did have unique things. And then with that too is like, outside of that, like gyros and like their impact, because we're playing Mechcommander, like we have some unique capabilities where it's all RNG to some extent, but it's fun stuff to where you can make this mech feel alive. And I feel like that's another thing too, is like, that there's layers to the mech, and like there's things that happen, like you said, negative quirks, like where it may influence and sort of give a mech a character, some type of character to some extent, until either you repair it or, maybe it's a good character. And so I don't know if we've committed to that, but the reason I felt like it was pretty important to bring up was because compatibility. Like I just feel I've played Reloaded. It does not fit Mechcommander well, and it doesn't fit.
The enemy composition of Reloaded is very hard in Mechcommander. Yes.
And when you rely on AI, and AI, that's another discussion. But like, and then I switched to Merc Tech, and I liked stuff, but it went too down the rabbit hole, and it was like, he
does have a Merc Tech Lite version out now.
Yeah.
Which might be checking out if you haven't.
Yeah. And I feel like there's it's just not our vision. So it's like us utilizing someone else up until we get to a point of saying we are going to have to cross over. And so we're just letting you guys know, if you play Mechcommander Mercenaries, there will probably be a time where, it'll be our mech lab and it'll override others. And
we'll be sure to keep the versions that don't have that on Nexus.
Yes.
So if you play on EGS and all of a sudden an update, breaks compatibility with a bunch of mods that you like, we'll leave the old versions on Nexus. So it's not like you are out, you just won't get the new updates, which
sort of sucks.
But
that's the thing, is like, we're going to eventually have to do that, even when it comes to AI. Like AI missions is another cool thing. That's actually another reason why I'm sort of waiting on DLC 2, which is the Beachhead mission opens up and has multiple objectives, which is awesome.
So the secondary and optional objectives already exist in.
Yes, they already did.
Mech 5. They're already in the campaign missions, I think.
They just did well, and they didn't implement it fully in all of the procedural stuff.
It's not implemented in procedural at all.
Yes.
So part of the reason I really am looking forward to getting it is so I can look at the Beachhead scenario generator in Unreal and see what Dave and the gang came up with for doing those secondary objectives, and see if there's some knowledge you can kind of read off of what they did to implement our own stuff.
Yeah, that's where I was hoping they would document that though and release that. Like,
because
that would just make everything easier. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's practical for it, because we've had a few people ask about like, well, why aren't you just doing a big story? It's like, there's like 3 of us, 4 of us, with one doing the majority of the work. Like, that's not.
If this was my full-time job and I worked on it 60 hours a week, we still wouldn't have full campaign.
Now there is apparently, supposedly, again, we talked about that other project. I'm assuming they're doing stuff. They haven't released any information. So
as far as I know, they have some like gaming industry experience on their team. So
we haven't seen. I have no idea. All I know is right now it's vaporware.
We were kind of secretive too, but ours just didn't take as long to get out because it's.
Well, but I mean, we, like, I just didn't want to. I didn't want, I talked a little bit about it, but I wasn't gonna release something until we had something playable, and so we set a deadline and said, okay, this is the way to go. But like, and I think this is important. Of like, what will set MCM apart from just being like RTS Mechwarrior 5, because that's basically what we have right now, and so then adding missions, one of the issues I have with a lot of the missions is they don't feel like it's set in the actual BattleTech universe. Like, and what I mean by that is like actual, like if you're doing a defense of an area, right? One, enemies aren't going to drop dropships on you because they're super valuable. They don't want to lose them.
Well,
right?
they might once in a while.
Once in a while, sure.
But not every time.
And then, if you're doing a defense, basically all it is right now is like, imagine a square and it drops it on this side and then drops on this side, drops on this side, drops on this side. And that's not, it's all those systems we're going to be looking at of hopefully altering, because I don't think they've altered much other than I know they're redoing their basically the unit selection process for what units you go up against, which is big. I just don't know if it will be what like we're looking for. It'll be interesting to sort of see.
Well, and I know a lot of what he's talked about it in the modding chat, Dave from PGI, that they're trying to get it so that the factions have a little bit more unique balance of mechs, right? So you run into, was it Kurita has dragons?
Dragons.
Like, you're going to run into those, right? And so that system already exists in Mechwarrior 5, but because of the way battle value works out, you always see cicadas because everyone has them and they're cheap battle value, right? So that's something that I know they're going to adjust. But we don't know what else that's going to do. But it could, make a big change if they really, get it dialed in on what you run into and how much of stuff you run into.
Yeah.
Because the base game, you run into just so much stuff.
Yeah.
So much stuff.
Well, ours is a little bit different too, because you have the top-down view. Yeah. You physically can, you can see stuff and you can see stuff pop in too. So that's something that I'm sure we'll look at, because just the missions themselves, we were talking about the mission names and what they are, like, like assassinate. I do think you brought this up, is maybe assassinate, you don't have a whole lot of salvage, because basically your idea is you're landing on, potentially, it doesn't have to be all of them. Let's just say you can land, and as long as you destroy everything before you extract, you're, like that's a part of the secondary objective. If you destroy, then you can have salvage or whatever. But like, if you're landing to take out a kernel, and as soon as you land and you like, one, it should be operate differently too. Like, as soon as you make contact, or like they're aware of you, whether it's some type of sensor towers, or you do engage and like you have within a minute to destroy a mech before they get up a message, something like that, whatever it is, one, the target should be notified, and either they're trying to extract him or her or whatever, or they converge on your position to try to destroy you. So like, one of the things that you were bringing up was, what if once you hit the target, you need to get the fuck out of there, because if you don't, they're landing reinforcements that you're not going to be able to, well, maybe you could.
You're now the assassin target.
Yeah, you're now the target, and you need to GTFO. And that sort of goes to like the secondary and tertiary and other type of, like, it just, when I play the game, it doesn't feel like real life. And what I mean by that is like how real military, or like how, like, if you're taking on an objective, or like, it doesn't feel like a real situation. And I feel like that's another thing, is like, call that the military guy in me, but also just of like, it, like, as soon as they get contact, they would be calling to their buddies, letting them know, like, hey, HQ, we got enemy forces here. We need immediate reinforcements, or we need a Renovus at this location.
Well,
or,
some of them would. There's in BattleTech, there's going to be some kernel that's like, oh no, I'm way better than these measly mercs.
Sure, but I mean, that's the thing, is like, if we had in Mechcommander, the original game, where it's like, hey, just to FYI, if you take out those power generators over there, it cuts off their comms. Or if you take out those satellite dishes, it cuts off, like, we don't have any of that in the current game. And that's something where we're, would be great, which is like, what if you do hit that installation over there, that cuts off there, and it gives you like a 5-minute window or a 10-minute window, but just, or those are the type of things I feel like, that along with defense, along with all the other game modes, Warzone, like, we want to bring those game modes to where it's like, oh shit. And obviously
and to make them a little bit better for RTS mode, right? Because one of the things about having 12 mechs available is you don't necessarily need all 12 of them to sit at a defense objective. If you had an assassination target in a defense mission, that would give you a bonus, or either a bonus payout or a a bonus in defending the base, you would send a lance to go kill that guy, right? So there's some of that where,
especially if like you hit a target and the target starts fleeing, and so you do need those faster mechs to pursue the target before it gets to the edge of the.
Or it's, hey, go rescue this artillery battery that's under attack, and you gotta go kill the targets in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I got a light lance. Go.
Yeah, because that could be a defense mission too, where you actually have, and that's the thing with our game is you're going to have up to 12 deployable of your own, but potentially even more, because like you can control mechs and vehicles already that are on their blue forces. There's nothing stopping us from like having, as long as you're keeping those artillery safe, you can call in artillery, or as long as you're keeping that air radio traffic, building up, you have air support every once in a while, every few minutes. Like we have that ability. It's just not in the game. And that's where I feel like the game will turn into like from RTS Mechwarrior 5 to, oh crap, this is actually a completely different experience.
Yeah. Well, and I think the beachhead actually is a good example. They, in the video they've shown in with Chris, I think, originally when they were showing off some of that, they showed a beachhead playthrough, and the targets destroy these towers to get reinforcements, and then a friendly dropship comes in and drops just random mechs off. It's like, oh well, the mech commander in me is like, yeah, all right, give me more stuff to play with. Awesome. So there's a lot of potential in that to kind of make that more RTS friendly. So
and because our RTS is a little bit more grandiose, like I think we could do some fun stuff where it's like, yeah, there may be bigger battles, because like you've done some fun stuff with like just spamming urban mechs and like Jaegers, but I mean you can have quite a bit on screen before things start, and I'm sure there's performance and stuff that we may look at.
But especially without the right performance mods on.
Yeah. But even I'm hoping that fix comes in that DLC, because that
it should be. They already fixed on their end, I think. So
So, but I mean, imagine like an actual legit where you're part of a bigger, like you're this mercenaries hired. You're small. I mean, 12 mechs isn't anything. But imagine if all of a sudden, like during this defense mission, you had an entire company not join you, but walk through your area. Like they're going to, like that would be freaking cool. Like it's like, holy shit, like it's the freaking 12th Donegal Guards, or it's the Wolf Dragoons, like they're that those are the type of things.
Combined arms, massive scale battle would be amazing. Yeah. Especially when you're in that top down view, and if you do some of the visual enhancement mods, where everything's just going crazy. It could definitely be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I guess we talked about Mech Lab. We talked about I guess is there anything that you're really wanting as far as modding scene, like access to, or a feature, or is there anything that you've just been like, oh man, I wish we had this, other than just like their C++, like.
So I mean, yes, I would love to have their source code just to do whatever I wanted, but that's not going to happen. No, there's a few systems that I know that I've talked to Alex and the folks at PGI, and some of those are things that are going to be opened up in the DLC patch for the editor. So like it gives me access to a few tools that I need to fix Mason's AI, which is huge, because right now we have this stunt double and it works.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of bugs because it's a stunt double and weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
So, that's something I'm really looking forward to, is that next editor update with the patch for the DLC, so that I can go and fix some of those things that we just don't have access to right now, because they're systems they never intended, to use that way.
Yeah.
So there's a few things like that. And I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it, there's a bunch of systems that be like, well, I wish this had this, and this. On the back end, if only you guys would have done this one programming thing, it would have made my life a little easier.
Sure.
But we have access to do a lot of stuff. I mean, you could basically make their DLC almost in the editor right now if you really just had the time and energy and people. But
so I mean, why do you think there's such a, I guess, like a break? Why are so many people out there think that that's not possible? Is it because they just, obviously ignorance, they just don't know? But like, why do they? where's it coming from? Because like when I talk to you, it's like pretty much anything's possible, Phil. It's just, like, yeah, we may run into,
and
a hurdle, but like,
but they're not.
sure.
They're things you're going to run into after you've done a big part of a project. I think part of it is, the initial launch, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't open. So a lot of stuff with like how mechs handle and some of their stats and adjusting some of those things, you couldn't set in a blueprint. You couldn't, while the game's running, change a variable, So some of that's been opened up. So I think maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect where people heard initially that you can't do these things, but now you can.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of people I think wanted, like a level designer. Well, you have Unreal Engine, it has a level design tools that you could do anything you wanted in. Yeah. But you can do anything you want in, and you'd have to learn how to do those things. It's not like the old Mechcommander level editor where you just click, drop a couple units, start.
Yeah. That'd be nice. That'd be amazing. Nice. That'd be amazing.
But someone would have to make that, and that's just a lot of development time for them to throw at it. It would be cool though. But
well, I mean, I guess that just comes down to documentation and like just people understanding that. I mean, because I've seen rants, who you are. You know who you are out there. Of just
certain people that spent more time modding than me are still salty about things too.
Yeah, but also the fact of, I think because you're a programmer, you look at it differently. Yeah.
And I also, I've been on the industry. I've worked, on my own projects where things just aren't to that level because I had to get this thing done.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more forgiving than probably the average modder anyway.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff is just you got to sit down and do it, and it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And then like when you want to make a new mode or a new mission type, whatever, it's a complicated system. It's a whole procedural level generation system.
Yeah.
It's not holding your hand at all. It's what they had time to make for their own internal tools.
Yeah.
So you basically have to kind of reverse engineer what is going on in Dave F's brain. And poke him every once in a while and be like, hey Dave, what does this do?
That's the problem, is because like if you join the Discord, someone's probably done or similar to what you're doing, but it hasn't documented. So that's where I feel like the wiki is so important to like get those things documented. And then I wish PGI would just, and I get it because it means time. But I mean, time and effort, money.
Would you rather have, PGI writing a document or fixing game?
So then the argument could be made of, hey, look, guys, would you rather them do that? Or we can just take the burden under and that's what a lot of mod communities do, is they just, that's what they do. So I think that's the biggest.
Kind of where, PGI has a hard time telling you how to do it because doing it internally, they have access to source code and they can just go do a thing that we can't do in the editor as easy. So, some of that where like I'd ask Alex for some help. He's like, well, you can do that right now. I'm like, well, no, it doesn't work. Oh, it's fixed in our version, but it's not out in the editor yet.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to do that, when they're actively developing stuff too.
Yeah.
So, us, the community taking it on is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another big hurdle is you're having to learn an engine, but I guess it's powerful because there's so much you can do, but it's also daunting because you're hopping in, and if you've never done anything like that, what are some resources? I mean, other than joining, I guess, the Mechwarrior 5 Discord, I mean, from your point of view?
So what I did to learn, but I'm a programmer, so again, take this with a grain of salt, is I just started with a regular Unreal Engine before Mech 5 was even out. I just looked and like, okay, what do I want to try to do? What's some simple stuff I can start building now just to learn how things work in Blueprint? Like, it doesn't have to be anything related to Mechwarrior 5. You could just go in, like, I want to make a third-person shooter that does this, and just learn how those things work in Unreal. There's a lot of great YouTube tutorials out there, both that tell you how to do a whole project that I think the folks at Epic put out, or Unreal Engine, they're on their YouTube channel. And then also there's a bunch of just like, I want to know how this particular Blueprint node works. You can go Google it, and you'll find a YouTube video that's done by probably one guy that goes through and tells you exactly what that function does. So there's a lot of resources like that out there, but really just, if you want to learn Unreal Engine, start a small project in just regular Unreal Engine. Don't even worry about Mechwarrior 5 yet.
Yeah.
just go, I want to learn how to do something.
Yeah.
Just to get kind of your feet wet and learn what the engine can do.
Sure.
And follow some of those video tutorials. And then once you've kind of got an idea of, okay, this is what blueprints do, this is how Unreal does things, it's easier to go to Mechwarrior 5 and go, okay, if I'm expecting that this character or this player controller does this thing, where is it in Mech 5? How does it work here? And what did PGI do with it? And it's a lot easier to go, that instead of just diving in feet first.
And if you're already an expert, you need to reach out so you can join our team and help us with Mechcommander Mercenaries. So,
yeah.
Like, you're a 3D modeler out there, or an animator, or both, or a texture artist, or if you're a programmer, like, again, reach out, because I'm sure it'll help. So
yeah, and I've had some people reaching out to, like, how do I learn this? Can I, what can I do to, like, well, like basically what I just told you, just go do some tutorials, learn Unreal, and then worry about it.
Yeah.
And there's some simple stuff in Mechwarrior 5 editor that if you just want to learn what PGI did with mechs, you can go in and do that too. But learning Unreal Engine is good.
Like I said, unless that individual did that, was it the thug? I'm surprised we haven't seen more. Like I said, because like I get it to some extent, it's a lot of work, but even if it's just bare bones, like a simple texture or whatever, and just reuse the animations from other mechs, because like some of them are quite similar, like the Cataphract and the Timby, pretty much the same animation.
They actually did use the Cataphract for, I forget now. I've seen so many different mod things because I'm in the mod Discord and stuff too, so I see all sorts of videos. But people definitely reuse animations on new mech chassis. I think someone was it. I don't remember. I don't want to say because I don't remember what it was now, but. There's definitely some of that going on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, when I look at Mechwarrior 5, to me, the replayability is a big thing, obviously with Mechcommander, but just even if you were to look at it from whether you're playing a mod or not, of just saying, like, the quest, that's another thing that we're looking forward to, is the quest additions from Heroes of the Inner Sphere. It's like 50 new, whatever it was, the quest lines for the hero mechs and the quirks and so forth and so on. I think that'll just allow us to do. And another thing they talked about was the containers, what you have in the tutorial, the containers.
You and I talked about, like, man, they have the system and it's kind of there, but we should use that in Mechcommander. And now it's gonna be, I don't know if it's gonna be part of the DLC or the free update, I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly some opportunities there if it's
got loot in it. You
can do some stuff,
Containers, sort of like Mechcommander, or like we talked about, like, you've got so many planets that aren't used, like, but what if there was other, like, boring stuff, or like search, or I don't know, just stuff like you had to go check on some mining outpost sensor or something, and like
there's totally not lost tech on this planet. Maybe you should go check it out. Yeah,
I think just depth, and the infantry are obviously another thing coming, and that is actually something that we sort of touched on recently, which is will you even be able to see him? Because if we are not using Reloaded, we may, depending on, and I think they use a script too to shrink the mechs down, so we might dive into that, because the mechs may just be too big, where infantry would be so small they wouldn't be any.
Even if mechs get smaller, you're doing this bird's eye view. So there's already stuff where we get into level of detail looking kind of goofy on, like, bushes.
Yeah.
Bushes become 2D at a certain point.
Stickmen running around just like.
So I don't know what the infantry will look like in RTS mode, and it'll be interesting to see. And then do you take control of them? Do you have a UI that, because if there's like 70 infantry on screen, you're not going to have 70 little boxes on the screen. You're going to have an infantry box that has 70 on it that ticks down as people die. But what are you going to do with them in Mechcommander?
Well, that brings up, like I was mentioning, for a 3D artist out there, or someone that does that, there is a huge need and want for more vehicles in the game, like, just for a variety of reasons. Like, and I'm talking about, like, looking at modern day infantry fighting vehicles, or tanks, main battle tanks, APCs to missile carriers.
I think APCs right there is
that would be cool.
Make infantry way better. Is all of a sudden, I forget what it is. Is it like a hover APC that's like stupid fast in BattleTech. I forget now.
But I mean, think of it like the Bradley. I mean, you'd be able to, or like an LAV, pull up. But I mean, tanks also too, I feel like, get sort of shafted. They're really super easy to destroy. So that's one thing I'm sure we'll look at. And also, by the way, we're not going to discount you not having the ability to own said vehicles and use said vehicles.
I would like to do that system. We had talked at least about doing reinforcements where, you know, you have your mechs that you can reinforce with, and then have a few other options where it's like a vehicle company and, you know, a dropship full of mercs or something, you know, some options that have a cost benefit, you know.
It may be you're limited because you're on a leopard, or maybe you get a union later. I mean, we don't really know yet to that, so we can't commit to that, but like, there is a union in the game, and
I do have a button that drops one down.
Right. So, you know,
but,
like,
you know, there's some work to do to make that a full-fledged feature. So,
or even like defense missions or like sabotage or, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
it's just tough because it's, you know, got all of his turrets, and then you have to figure out, okay, how do I do health on this? And it doesn't have a destruction animation, I don't think. So you have to go figure that out. If you're going to blow one up, I don't know.
Yeah.
At least I don't think it has it. Maybe PGI has it hidden somewhere. I haven't seen it, but
I don't. Well, it wouldn't, because I don't. Nothing in the campaign ever had that. But well, man, we've got a date now, December 10th, that comes out. I don't know. Did they mention if the editor is going to get updated before it? Do they?
Not. My speculation is that the editor update will drop either that same day or later that week.
Yeah.
Or sometime, because I think last time they did a big update, we got a little bit of a delayed editor update. I don't remember now for sure, but
so before I forget this, why? What makes our mod unique as far as not being broke by like stuff like this is easy? What did you do when you're looking at it? Like, because I feel like some other people are like, I'm dreading this.
Part of it is that our mod has a lot of assets that I've made either copies and modified, and they're not overrides. They are an asset that PGI doesn't replace when they update. So we don't override as many assets as like Reloaded does. So there's like 2 or 3 classes that really are pivotal that I'll have to touch up whenever they do a big change. But like all of our UI and a bunch of other stuff is just off on its own. Including our player controller that has most of the bulk of like how RTS plays. That's my own file. It's not something that PGI did. And then I overwrite a file that, instead of going to the Mechwarrior one, goes to Mechcommander. So I just have to fix one file to replace all of this, you know, RTS stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just structured so it's not too bad. There's a few spots that can really kind of hurt because we do have some overrides in a few places. Like I know the scenario generator, to make it so the AI can capture objectives, is something I've had to do. So I'll have to redo that fix, but it's a very easy fix. So, you know, some of that's just, I need to go through and do the work once the editor update hits and make sure that I get all the new updates and fix the new updates with our changes. But it's not as doom and gloom as some projects would be with a ton of overrides.
Gotcha.
Because if you were overriding, I'm trying to think what a good example would be. Like maybe if you're overriding the mech class, like Merc Tech and Reloaded both do, now all of a sudden you've got to deal with quirks. So they probably did a bunch of work there. So you have to take their new file, port it over, and then take all of your code and dump it back into that file.
So how would you approach that though? Like if it had to do with like, if we're going to be doing Mech Lab, and like, are you just going to create your own as well so it does the exact same?
Probably going to derive a class from it. And do some voodoo, maybe. I don't know. I need to look at the structure and see if I can actually make it so instead of using their base class, I use my own classes based on it. I got to look and see where that's all hooked up.
But it's the idea that like that way it doesn't get screwed up, basically, as much at least. You don't have as much things tied into each other.
Yeah, that's the goal, and that's part of just programming. You know, you always try to kind of compartmentalize and encapsulate everything as far as you can. Now, some of the stuff I have just been lazy and not done that with, but you know, that's kind of the goal. Is you want to make it sure so that this little chunk that I make is my chunk all the time, and then I just fix this little bridge over here that connects it.
Yeah. So, and of course, you know, PGI, I mean, Russ basically said like they're not doing anything with engines. So like you can see they're not going to really mess with MechLab much. So that's good. But Quirks is touching a lot of those files, and if they do something else,
the kind of central file in Mechwarrior 5 is derived mech. That's what holds your your loadout, all the MechLab stuff, like everything touches that. So the quirk system has to be integrated into it somehow. So depending on how PGI did it, could break a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons. Like I think Naveed and maybe Magnum are kind of nervous about it.
Yeah.
But since it doesn't touch us, I'm like, oh, okay, no big deal, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Until we do our mech lab, then we'll see.
Yeah.
But
and until I figure out they broke some other thing that I need to fix and spend hours doing. But
well, I mean,
it's just it's what it is.
It is what it is, right? Challenges, another, but well, hey man, I just want to say thanks for taking the time. I mean, like I said, I felt like I wanted to talk to you because we talk all the time about the MWO stuff, and of course that being tied in with Mech 5. Is there anything with Mech 5 that you'd like to see that hasn't been a feature, added?
Oh man, that's tough. It's a good base, and I think there's a lot of stuff that they could add that would be good. I want to see just more kind of reason to work towards getting mechs. Like It seems like there's no end game. Like the end game in the story is go do the final mission, but there's not like you need to have all these assault mechs sitting around to go do anything else, right?
Like maybe gain a planet that's now your ownership, or get a union, or
if I was going to do it all proper, it'd be the clan invasion, and now your end game is just fighting the clans.
Can you survive? Or can you come out on top?
Something. Yeah, I don't know, but there's no real
some pressure.
Yeah, just something to keep you playing after you've accumulated all that stuff, other than just Pokemech.
Because me and you've talked about that. Like, what is the reason for playing other than but I will say, like, there is something about like the revolving door of like, for our game in particular, we don't have a main character. Like, we hope to get rid of Mason as far as like the ability to have just mech warriors, and maybe they have, like, it'd be great if like maybe they did age, and so you did have to, maybe they retired, or maybe like if mech warriors died more often. Like I don't think I've lost one yet, like ever playing. So it's one of those where like if
it's pretty rare, yeah.
If mechs and mech warriors rotation, and you have this cycle of maybe they're getting old and they need to retire, or like it's sort of the micro game, and the meta as far as behind the scenes. Like there's a lot of stuff that I could see would benefit there, of like having a like what is, because I mean if in reality, if it was real life, the thing would be to get to retirement age and not die, right? I mean, really, like if you're like involved in, if you're a merc, right, the time. And that's another thing is like because you're traveling all the time, it could be like my character's like 75 years old, blah blah blah.
That's not out of BattleTech scope, because people get stupid old and all the fluff and lore. But I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I think they could add, and it'll be interesting to see where they go with like their next DLC. Because I don't know I don't think it's gonna be clans in April. Like that's way too soon.
He didn't allude to it either.
He said eventually doing clans. Sure. Like obviously that's a thing you're gonna do sometime, but I can't see that being April. So I'm curious as to what they're gonna do next, because I don't know how much else, because the 7 chassis they're adding are just the other NWO chassis that fit the timeline.
Yeah, or the only thing I can think of is if they do a damn good job at an actual campaign, like an additional like quest system that's really deep and really good.
Or do they just throw out a whole DLC of just quests? There's no
good ones,
new crazy feature, just a bunch of handcrafted missions.
And I said this during the podcast, like the difference between HPS and Mech 5 is like, you could go talk to your engineer and he'd give you information. It was almost like an MMO, right? Like you go talk to and we don't have any of that. Fahad is this lifeless, soulless
Would you want to talk to Fahad more, Phil?
No. And also, but yes, I actually would if he, like, why do you fucking talk like that? Like, but it's broken down in the text they wrote for the building up, right? Randall Bills wrote them, and apparently they were good, but there's no context. Like the same thing with Rihanna. Like they have character art. I've seen it. Make the characters look like that. Like Unreal has some really cool mocap. By the way, Unreal has mocap that you can use your phone to capture. So like there's really no, like you don't have to go to a huge studio to do it.
Well,
like,
there's now going to be a tool in NVIDIA, right? Isn't that one of their things they announced with 3080s?
I don't know.
Their new software has a camera-based mocap.
I mean, but like you can make Fahad and Rihanna. Like, I just feel like what's the reason of having the dropship? That was never fully fleshed out. I just felt like it was like
because mechs are pretty,
but that's all.
RTX is pretty.
Yeah, but RTX, I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like
I don't use it most of the time because it's an FPS drop, but
if you give reason for the like, having a, I don't know. We've talked about this before, like how down the sim sort of aspect do you go? Like you have to manage food and water and oh well, to take off, your
dropship
hydrogen. Yeah, your dropship needs some hydrogen. Well, we're gonna have to wait. Like it's not like how far down do you go to the mercenary simulation? I think some people would love the shit out of that, and I think some people
would. Trail.
Yeah, like the nuances of like interpersonal relationships with the crew and like I don't know, BattleTech BTA does some really cool stuff, and that's one thing too is like if you piss someone off, maybe someone comes to visit you on a mission that you are not expecting, or maybe you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time and you have to make a decision, because that's not looking good. But
Space AT&T has sent collectors after you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
That's where I feel like the depth of the gameplay, especially that's why I say different type of vehicles, because like I think if you can add vehicles that have unique abilities and aspects, I mentioned the whole smoke previously, like if certain mechs or all mechs had the ability to have like some type of chaff or smoke, but when you do that, enemies can't shoot you and you can't hit shit, but maybe it's a tactical thing, or maybe there's vehicles that can start like deploy mortar team or stuff like that, and start those type of things that like I just feel like depth of what's happening, on the battlefield. Same thing with like VTOLs of like, yeah. So,
well, and certainly in the Mechcommander view of the world, right? Those things are more interesting if you can click and deploy a mortar than you're driving in a mech and all of a sudden one of your vehicles is like over there shooting mortars that you don't see. It's just not as fun from a cockpit, but for Mechcommander it makes a ton of sense.
Like, what if you physically had to? I actually physically have a artillery piece. It's like a mobile, 155 howitzer sort of thing. But no, like it's a vehicle, but you have to position it. It has to deploy, but it's vulnerable. So like
for Piranha when you do that too.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is like that makes sense. Like it's not just this magical thing that you always get. It's like, no, that's a physical asset. You want to keep it safe. So, and those are the type of things. Yeah, it's expensive. Like, that's why I feel like, tanks and stuff and mechs. I don't know. There's a lot on our plate and a lot of ideas. That
our design doc scares me a little, but
goes on.
There's a lot of stuff I think we can do with it, and there's a lot of stuff PGI can do with it. So hopefully, as they release new DLCs, we get more, options for us, maybe some ideas, and vice versa. Even who knows?
It'll be interesting, especially with our artillery where the UI is on the ground. Are we going to be able to use that right off the bat? Do we have a different?
I mean, yeah.
Ish,
I assume.
I think that ability will look really cool from our perspective. That's one thing too, is like, cause you got a better, like, oh shit, I think that'll be cool.
It seems like it could be a little bit awkward from first person just cause there's, it's on the terrain and, are you going to see it or not?
Yeah.
But certainly from RTS view, that's going to be interesting.
When you play,
it's going to suck is when your artillery gets hit, on a mech and you're like, oh, I forgot to tell him to move.
Yeah. But that's like, I don't know. That'll be, I think that's one thing when you play the game in MCM, you're like, it's almost like the game was meant to be played like this, you know? And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. But let's go to wrap it up. We've been talking for a bit. Thank you again for being on here. Sorry I kept you up.
Are you sure we're doing a podcast, or is this just your usual, semi-annual rant?
Probably both. You know, I go on a daily rant, I think is... You should try it. It's really healthy. You just get it out, you know, just...
I don't have to try it, Phil. I've been doing it vicariously by listening to you.
Yeah.
Way too much.
That's what it is. I know.
No,
moderator, you come in and... Yeah, man. Just want to say thanks again. Nice shirt, by the way.
I mean, good quality merch.
Yeah, you know where you can get those at is if you go to NoGutsNoGalaxyStore.com. You got a wide variety. There's even mouse pads, big freaking mouse pads.
Big freaking mouse pads.
It's like 36 inches by 18. They're huge, but I mean they're pretty baller.
You shouldn't even have that much desk space at this point.
I was like, and then you posted that like LED mouse pad. I was like, you might as well just start like. That's a desk, like the size of some of these mouse pads are getting. But anyways, if you'd like one, head over.
Those are to go with the desk. Those companies also make, Phil.
Yeah. RGB everything. So
yes.
But yeah, guys, just want to say thank you again for listening. We'd love to hear your comments. What do you guys think about the topics we talked about? If you haven't checked out MCM and you love Mechcommander, make sure to go download. Obviously, we'll let you guys know more about the Steam launch and the workshop. We don't know if they'll have that ability. And then same thing with GOG. How's that going to work? Obviously, we have Nexus, so you can always manually do it if need be. I do like having the Epic one. It's a little bit of a pain for us, though, when we get like a new build, because then I got to go turn it off, and then, you don't have to worry about that. But so pay attention to that. I'll update you guys. I'm sure me and Torry here will sit back down and like talk about, hey, this is happening, and this is what maybe we'll showcase or whatever. But yeah, if you guys liked the podcast, make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, leave comments down below. By the way, this podcast is supported by viewers and listeners. If you're out there like you, if you enjoy what I do here, if you like the discussions, the podcast, the content that I create on a daily basis, consider supporting in a variety of ways, whether that's heading over to Twitch and hanging out and enjoying. Consider becoming a sub. It really does help. Like I said, every little bit counts. If you want to become a podcast sponsor, maybe you want to sponsor a podcast like this, maybe you want to sponsor individually, or you have a unit you want to give a shout out to, or anything like that. Check out the Patreon as well, but also you can just reach out to me on Discord and we can talk about that. And of course, that's also stream. Maybe you want to sponsor a stream. Let me know. Who knows? We'll talk. And of course, if you shop on Amazon, if you want to help support me and the podcast, consider using my associates link. I'll have it down below. All these links down below, by the way. It adds nothing to your cart and your order, but I get kickbacks when you guys order like anything. It doesn't give me personal info, so like I don't know who ordered whatever. It just shows like, hey, someone bought whatever, a 3080. I don't know, whatever. Good luck with that. But anyways, I'll have those links down below. If you'd like to help out. And by the way, if you are purchasing on Epic Game Store, I do have a code. I don't know, what do they call it there? Anyways, it's Tiny Terrier. I'll have this again in the links down below, but multiple ways for you guys to support. Again, all I ask is how do you value my content? And I think that's very important. If you have the ability, obviously if you're still in the middle of COVID, some people don't have jobs. I'm not talking to you. You got to worry about you, focus on you and your family. But if you have the ability, what is my content worth to you? Again, consider heading over to Patreon and support. And yeah, I just want to say thank you again. We've had huge feedback about podcast 204, and I just sat down with Beard yesterday with 205, and we'll be coming out with this one with Torry as well. And I've got more podcasts lined up. So yeah, I'm excited, man. Thank you again for being on. Thank you for putting up with me and being a mod, and then also being our lead guy. Look forward to seeing what happens. Obviously, we only have a few more months between now and the launch, and then on to the fun, the diving into all the goodies. So
you get all the work I have to do. Thanks.
More rants will come. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, just want to say thank you again. This was your local No Guts, No Galaxy Mechwarrior podcast. Signing off for tonight. My name is Phil. Until next time. We're working on it. It's all right. It's all right. I don't blame you.